Okay, let's talk about that voice. You know the one. The little narrator inside your head that's pretty much always on. It's commenting, it's criticizing, it's cheering you on. It just never really stops. Well, today we're going to get into the surprising science of that inner voice.
I mean, we've all been there, right? The alarm goes off and you groan out loud, "Ugh, 5 more minutes." Or maybe you're frantically looking for your keys and you just blurt out, "Where did I put them?" to an empty room. It can feel, well, a little weird, maybe even embarrassing. But here's the thing you absolutely need to know. All that talking to yourself, it's not a sign you're going off the rails. It's 100% normal. In fact, pretty much every single one of us does it. So let's figure out what this voice is all about and why it's even there in the first place.
So, what's the official term for this? Well, psychologists call it self-talk. And that's a pretty broad term. It covers everything from that silent movie narration that's constantly running in your mind, your inner speech, to those moments when you actually say your thoughts out loud. It's basically your own personal commentary track for your life.
Now, this inner conversation didn't just pop up out of nowhere when you became an adult. Nope. To really get why it's so powerful, we have to rewind all the way back to the beginning to see how that voice first learned to speak.
So, way back in the 1930s, a Russian psychologist named Lev Vygotsky had this amazing insight into how this all develops. See, it starts with kids just repeating things they hear from adults. Then they start talking to themselves out loud, narrating what they're doing with their toys, guiding themselves through a task. This is them practicing how to manage their feelings and actions. And then eventually, all that external chatter, it just goes underground. It becomes the private, internal dialogue we all have as adults.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Because that voice, it's not just harmless background noise. The words you say to yourself, whether in your head or out loud, can literally rewire your brain. This little conversation has some very real, very powerful effects. You might think self-talk is just, fluff. But the neuroscience tells a totally different story. When you just think a thought, you're mostly using one part of your brain. But the moment you speak that thought aloud, bam, you light up a whole bunch of different brain regions at the same time. And this is just so cool. You're not just thinking it anymore. You're activating the part of your brain that produces speech, the part that understands language, and even the part that processes the sound of your own voice. You're basically sending that thought through 3 different systems instead of just one. What this does is it interrupts old, lazy thought patterns and kicks your brain into active problem-solving mode. You're literally carving out new pathways in your brain. And the results are pretty stunning. There was this one study on college tennis players, and they found that when the players used really simple instructional phrases out loud during practice, things like keep your eye on the ball, their focus and their accuracy actually got better. So this isn't just theory. It has a real impact on how we perform. But there's a flip side. For as much as our self-talk can be our biggest cheerleader, it can also be our absolute harshest critic. So let's talk about the dark side of this inner conversation. Does that one sound familiar? I think for a lot of us, it does. That's the voice of the inner critic. It's the one that loves to show up right after you've made a mistake and hit you with these huge, sweeping judgments. And in the moment, boy, does it feel true.
But I want you to stop and really think about this for a second. Imagine your best friend messed something up. Would you ever in a million years look them in the eye and say, "You can't do anything right"? No way! You'd be kind, you'd be supportive. Yet for some reason, we say these brutal things to ourselves all the time.
And make no mistake, this stuff is not harmless. That kind of negative self-talk can spin into this toxic, repetitive loop. Research clearly shows that high levels of it are linked to anxiety. And that habit of ruminating, just playing our problems over and over in our heads, that's known to make feelings of depression even worse. So that's the tough part. But the good news, the really good news, is that we are not stuck. If that inner conversation is turned sour, we have the power to change the channel. There are real, proven tools we can use to start a brand new dialogue. In fact, there's a whole field of psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, that's all about this. A big part of CBT is learning strategies to catch those negative thought loops as they're happening, and then consciously swapping them out for thoughts that are more realistic or even just a little more compassionate. And here is a super powerful, but really simple technique. It's called distanced self-talk. Instead of saying I, like I'm so stressed, you switch to using your own name or you. That tiny shift creates a little bit of psychological distance. It lets you step back from the emotion and look at the situation more like a supportive friend would,
And studies show it's incredibly effective for managing stress.
So, as we start to pull all this together, it's worth taking a moment to think about what this inner voice really is. It's not just some random brain quirk. It's probably the most important relationship you will ever have.
I mean, think about it. That voice has been with you longer than your parents, your partners, your friends, anyone. It was there before you could even form memories, and it will be there with you right until the very end. So it really all boils down to this. You are stuck in a lifelong conversation with yourself. So the quality of that conversation is going to have a massive impact on the quality of your life.
The stories you tell yourself really do become the life you live. But you're not just a passive listener here. You get to be an active part of the conversation. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Since you're going to be talking to yourself all day anyway, what kind of conversation are you going to choose to have?